$27,498 transferred to personal account. Needed it for emergency. Don't try to contact me. I'm extending my conference stay. We'll talk when I get back. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I stared at the notification on my phone, the blue light illuminating my face in the darkness of our Portland home at 2:14 a.m. My name is Michael Parker, 38 years old, and I just discovered that my wife of 12 years had emptied our emergency fund while supposedly attending a marketing conference in Seattle. I set my phone down on the kitchen counter and took a long sip of water. The house was quiet except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. My mind, however, was anything but quiet. I'm a risk assessment consultant for financial institutions. I evaluate vulnerabilities for a living, yet somehow I'd missed the biggest vulnerability in my own home. Or had I? The truth is, I hadn't missed the signs. I'd just chosen to ignore them. The late-night texts she'd shielded from my view, the sudden interest in fitness that coincided with a specific personal trainer at her gym, business trips that grew longer and more frequent, new clothing that only seemed to be worn when she was away. I noticed it all because noticing patterns is what I do professionally. But acknowledging those patterns meant acknowledging what they added up to, and I wasn't ready for that. Until now. I opened my laptop and logged into our bank's secure portal using my credentials. As a security precaution, I'd set up alerts on any transactions over $5,000. What Jennifer didn't know was that I'd received the fraud alert from the bank 4 hours before her text, along with a courtesy call from Marcus, the night manager at a local branch who knew me from our weekly racquetball games. Michael, system flagged a large withdrawal from your emergency fund. Standard procedure is to freeze the account until we confirm. Should I? I'd paused, staring at the ceiling of our home office. No, Marcus, let it go through, but keep me updated if there's anything else. You sure? This doesn't seem like your normal pattern. I'm sure, and Marcus, thanks for the call. I knew what was happening even before Jennifer's text confirmed it. The conference in Seattle was scheduled to end tomorrow. The extended stay wasn't on any calendar, and the emergency wasn't explained. I picked up my phone and called my brother. David, he answered on the fourth ring, voice thick with sleep. Mike, it's the middle of the night. What's wrong? Remember that conversation we had at Dad's funeral? About being prepared for when the other shoe drops. A pause. Yeah. The shoe just dropped. I need to activate Phoenix. David was instantly alert. Are you absolutely certain? Once we start... She emptied the emergency fund. Bank already flagged it as potential fraud. She's with him right now. I'll start the protocol in the morning. Get some sleep, Mike. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. I ended the call and walked through our house, seeing it with new eyes. The framed photos from our vacation in Maui last year, the expensive sectional sofa she'd insisted we needed, the kitchen renovation that had cost twice the original budget. When had our home become a showcase rather than a sanctuary? When had I become just another asset in Jennifer's portfolio? I met Jennifer Walsh during my second year at the consulting firm. I was 26, fresh out of my MBA program and entirely focused on building my career in financial risk assessment. Jennifer was 24, working in the marketing department with an ambition that matched mine and a smile that made me forget deadlines and data points. She was brilliant, charming, and had a gift for making people feel special, including me. We dated for 9 months before I proposed and married 6 months after that. My parents thought we were rushing. Jennifer said, when you know, you know. For the first 5 years, we were in sync. We bought our starter home in Selwood, adopted a golden retriever named Scout, and mapped out our future with 5-year plans and shared calendars. Jennifer's career in marketing took off, with promotions that soon had her managing major client accounts. My work in risk assessment was steady, respected, and well compensated, if not as flashy as hers. The shift happened gradually. Jennifer began attending more networking events, client dinners that ran late, industry conferences. "It's how relationships are built in my field," she'd explain when I questioned the frequency. "Not everyone can sit behind spreadsheets all day." That comment stung, but I let it go. I understood ambition, I respected drive, and I trusted her. When she suggested we upgrade to a larger home in the more prestigious hillside neighborhood, I agreed despite my reservations about the extended mortgage. When she wanted to lease a luxury SUV, I signed the papers. When she proposed expensive renovations to our barely lived-in house, I nodded and transferred the funds. My father pulled me aside during a family barbecue in our new backyard. "Son, this is a beautiful home," he said, glancing around at the professional landscaping and custom patio. "Just make sure you're not building a house of cards." I'd bristled. "Jenny and I are doing well, Dad. We can afford this." He placed his hand on my shoulder. "That's not what I meant, Michael. Just remember that the foundation matters more than the facade." 2 months later, he was gone. Heart attack while working in his garden. At the funeral, David had found me alone on the porch of our parents' home. "Dad worried about you," he said, joining me in watching the sunset. "He thought you were setting yourself up for a fall." "What did he mean?" David sighed. "He thought Jenny was more invested in what you provide than who you are." I'd wanted to argue, to defend both Jennifer and my choices. Instead, I found myself saying, "If that's true, I should prepare for the worst." "And if it's not true, no harm done," David replied. "Either way, I've got your back." That night, Operation Phoenix was born. Not out of vindictiveness or suspicion, but out of a need for security. A contingency plan for a scenario I hoped would never materialize. For the next 4 years, I quietly restructured aspects of my financial life. I created a separate emergency fund that Jennifer didn't know about. I documented every unusual expense, every unexplained absence. I set up monitoring on our joint accounts. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I even established a small consulting LLC on the side that Jennifer believed was merely a tax strategy recommended by our accountant, all while hoping I'd never need any of it. The changes in Jennifer became more pronounced after my father's death. Her girls' weekends grew more frequent. Her interest in our shared activities waned. When I suggested we try for children, as we'd always planned, she suddenly had new concerns about timing and career impact. When I mentioned renovating my home office, she called it unnecessary spending. 2 weeks after ordering custom drapes for the formal dining room we never used, I noticed it all, catalogued it all, and said nothing. Last month, Jennifer mentioned a 3-day marketing conference in Seattle. "All the major players will be there," she said, excited. This could mean big things for my department. I wished her luck and helped her pack. I even drove her to the airport, kissing her goodbye at departures. That night, I received a text with a photo of her conference badge and the Seattle skyline from her hotel room. 2 days later, my credit card company called about an unusual charge. A dinner for 2 at an upscale Seattle restaurant with a $300 wine purchase. Not typical conference expenditure. Still, I said nothing. The night before she was due home, the bank alert came in, followed by Marcus's call, followed by Jennifer's text. Now, standing in our kitchen at 3 a.m., I opened my email and sent a pre-drafted message to my personal attorney. The subject line read, "Phoenix Activation." The body contained just one line: "Implement Phase 1 immediately." Then I went upstairs, packed a bag with essentials, and took one last look at the bedroom Jennifer and I had shared. The custom bedding she'd insisted complemented her skin tone. The decorative pillows that had to be arranged just so. The framed photo of us from a charity gala, the only photo displayed in the bedroom. I picked up the frame and noticed what I hadn't before. In the image, Jennifer was looking not at me, but past me, her smile directed at someone else outside the frame. I placed the photo face down and left with my bag. Scout followed me to the door, confused by the late-night activity. I knelt down and scratched behind his ears. "I'll be back for you, buddy. Promise." I checked into a modest hotel downtown, one Jennifer would never think to look for me. Then I sent her a 2-word response to her message. Noted. Safe travels. Then I turned off my phone and slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I walked into my office at Riverfront Financial Consultants as if it were any other day. My assistant, Sarah, looked up in surprise. "Michael, I thought you were taking time off while Jennifer was at her conference." "Change of plans," I said, setting my coffee on my desk. "Can you pull the Morrison account files? I want to review the risk assessment before Thursday's meeting." Sarah nodded, but hesitated at the door. "Just so you know, Jennifer called the office twice yesterday looking for you, said your phone was going straight to voicemail." "Battery issues," I replied, not looking up from my computer. "If she calls again, please take a message." Sarah studied me for a moment. She'd been my assistant for 8 years and knew me better than most. "Everything okay, Michael?" I finally looked up. "Just some unexpected developments that need my attention, Sarah. Nothing I can't handle." She nodded again. "The Morrison files will be on your desk in 10 minutes. By lunchtime, Phase 1 of Phoenix was in motion. My attorney had filed emergency motions to freeze all joint accounts pending investigation of unauthorized transfers. The LLC I'd established had already transferred consulting payments to a separate account. The documentation I'd been gathering for years was now in the hands of my financial forensics team. At 2:47 p.m., my phone lit up with Jennifer's name. I declined the call. 3 more calls followed in rapid succession, then a text. "What the hell, Michael? My cards are being declined. The hotel is asking about payment. Call me now." I didn't respond. Instead, I called David. "Phase 1 complete," I said when he answered. "How's Phase 2 coming?" "Already on it. Alex Reynolds, 32, personal trainer and wellness entrepreneur. 3 failed businesses in the last 5 years. Currently living in a high-end apartment. In Seattle he can't afford. Been posting photos with Jennifer for months under the radar. Private accounts, but nothing stays truly private these days." "And the timeline?" "Based on credit card records, hotel bookings, and geolocation data from the accounts you had monitoring permissions for, they've been meeting up for at least 7 months. She's been funding weekend getaways, expensive dinners, even some of his business investments." I closed my eyes, absorbing the confirmation of what I'd already suspected. "What about the emergency fund transfer?" "That's the interesting part," David said. "It wasn't just a vacation extension. Based on what I've found, they put a deposit down on a condo in Seattle yesterday, in both their names." The final piece clicked into place. Not just an affair, a new life. One she'd been planning and funding with our money. "Thanks, David. Proceed with Phase 3. Already in progress, and Mike, she doesn't know what's coming." I ended the call and returned to my work, methodically reviewing client risk assessments and making notations as if my personal life wasn't imploding. Compartmentalization is a skill I'd mastered professionally. Now it was serving me personally. At 6:15 p.m., Sarah knocked on my door. "Jennifer's here," she said quietly. "She seems upset." I nodded. "Please show her in." Jennifer stormed into my office, designer handbag clutched tightly, hair pulled back in the severe ponytail she wore. When particularly angry, she'd clearly come straight from the airport, still wearing her traveling clothes, expensive cashmere sweater, and tailored slacks. "What is going on?" she demanded, as Sarah quietly closed the door behind her. "My cards are declined. The bank won't release our emergency fund, and you haven't answered a single call." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Please, sit down." "I don't want to sit down." I want answers. Jennifer, I said calmly, you transferred nearly $28,000 from our emergency fund without discussion or agreement. The bank flagged it as potential fraud. I confirmed it was unauthorized. This is the natural consequence. Her expression shifted from anger to calculated charm so quickly it was almost impressive. She softened her stance and moved around the desk to my side. Michael, honey, there's been a misunderstanding. The conference had an amazing investment opportunity, limited time offer for a wellness retreat property. I didn't want to bother you with the details when you've been so busy with work. I looked at her directly. Is that why you needed the money, for an investment property? Exactly, she said, relieved I seemed to be understanding. It's a guaranteed return. I was going to surprise you with the details when I got home. And the condo in Seattle, the one you put a deposit on yesterday, with Alex Reynolds. Her face went perfectly still. The mask of charm dissolved, replaced by cold calculation. You've been spying on me. No, Jennifer. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference. She straightened up, moving away from me. This is insane. You've been monitoring my spending, my whereabouts? That's controlling and obsessive. Is that what you're going with? That I'm the villain in this story? I kept my voice level. Not the person who emptied a joint emergency fund to put a deposit on property with someone else. It wasn't like that, she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. It was exactly like that, and it wasn't the first time, just the largest amount. You've been funding your relationship with Alex for months, using our joint accounts. She paced the office, recalibrating. Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Alex. Our marriage has been effectively over for years, Michael. You're always working, always distant. Alex makes me feel alive. Does he make you feel financially secure too? Because he seems to need a lot of financial support for someone who's supposedly so successful. Jennifer's eyes narrowed. Don't you dare judge him. At least he's passionate about something. When was the last time you showed any passion for anything, including me? I didn't rise to the bait. This isn't about passion, Jennifer. It's about trust and honesty, both of which are clearly broken. So what now? You've frozen our accounts, you're monitoring my every move. What's your endgame here? Punishment? I shook my head. Protection. I'm protecting what's mine after you decided to take what wasn't. Yours alone to take. She laughed bitterly. Always so measured, so controlled. Even now, does anything actually touch you, Michael? For the first time, I let some emotion enter my voice. Finding out my wife of 12 years used our emergency savings to start a new life with someone else? Yes, Jennifer. That touched me. She had the grace to look away momentarily. Then her chin came up defiantly. I want half of everything. That's my right. Half of what's in our joint names, certainly, but you seem to be under the impression that's all there is. Confusion flickered across her face. What are you talking about? You'll find out during disclosure, I said, turning back to my computer. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to finish. This isn't over, she said, grabbing her bag. On that point, I replied without looking up, we're in complete agreement. After Jennifer left, I called David again. She came to the office, tried to claim it was an investment opportunity, then pivoted to blaming me for being distant. Classic deflection, David said. How are you holding up? I'm fine, I said automatically. No, you're not. But you will be. Phase 3 is complete. We've documented everything, including the condo deposit. Your attorney has filed the divorce petition citing financial misconduct, and I've got a surprise for you. What's that? Scout is already at my place. I picked him up this afternoon with the spare key. Jennifer left the front door wide open when she rushed off to confront you. For the first time since the bank alert, I felt something crack in my careful composure. Thanks, David. That's what brothers are for. Come by when you're done at work. We'll order pizza and figure out next steps. That night, sitting on David's back deck with Scout sleeping at my feet, I felt the full weight of what had happened and what was still to come. "You know what the strangest part is," I said, looking up at the stars barely visible through Portland's light pollution. "I prepared for this possibility for years, but I still hoped I was wrong." David handed me another beer. "That's because you're a good person, Mike. You wanted to believe the best in her, even when the evidence pointed otherwise. Dad saw it before I did. Dad had an unfair advantage, perspective from outside the situation. You were too close to see it clearly." I nodded, absently scratching Scout behind the ears. "What happens tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," David said firmly, "you start rebuilding, on your terms, without someone constantly moving the foundation under your feet." The next 2 weeks unfolded with a precision that would have been satisfying professionally if it wasn't so personally painful. My attorney presented evidence of Jennifer's financial misconduct, not just the emergency fund transfer, but dozens of smaller transactions over months that had funded her relationship with Alex. Jennifer hired an aggressive divorce attorney known for scorched earth tactics, who promptly demanded full financial disclosure of all assets. When the disclosure revealed the consulting LLC and its accumulated earnings, all meticulously documented and legally established years before any marital issues, her attorney called it hidden assets and threatened additional legal action. My attorney calmly presented the operating agreement I'd signed with David 4 years earlier, the tax returns showing all income properly reported, and the business plan dated shortly after my father's funeral. "Not hidden," my attorney explained, "simply separate and established well before any extramarital relationship began." 3 days later, I received a text from an unknown number. "You need to back off. Jenny deserves better than your controlling BS. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be." I forwarded it to David without comment. An hour later, he sent me a detailed financial report on Alex Reynolds, including his maxed-out credit cards, 2 previous bankruptcies, and a pending lawsuit from investors in his last failed wellness concept. "Should we send this to Jennifer?" David asked when he called. "No," I said after a moment's consideration. "She made her choice with the information she had. What happens next is her journey, not mine." The following week, Jennifer's attorney requested a settlement conference, a significant shift from their previous aggressive stance. My attorney advised me this suggested they'd recognized their position wasn't as strong as they'd initially believed. In the conference room of my attorney's office, Jennifer looked tired. The designer outfit and perfect makeup couldn't hide the strain around her eyes. Her attorney spoke first. "My client is prepared to negotiate a reasonable settlement, provided Mr. Parker is willing to release some of the frozen assets immediately." My attorney smiled politely. "That's certainly something we can discuss, but first, we have some new information relevant to these proceedings." She slid a folder across the table. Bank records confirmed that Mrs. Parker not only transferred emergency funds without authorization, but also opened a joint line of credit with Mr. Reynolds, using the hillside property as collateral, property that is still in both spouses' names. Jennifer's attorney paged through the documents, expression darkening. He whispered something to Jennifer, who shook her head vehemently. "Mrs. Parker assures me she never signed any such document," her attorney stated firmly. My attorney nodded. "Understandingly, that's what makes this particularly concerning. The bank's fraud department has confirmed the digital application was submitted using Mrs. Parker's credentials, but from a device registered to Mr. Reynolds, not from any device Mrs. Parker has ever used to access the account." Jennifer stared at me, face pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm not saying anything," I replied calmly. The bank's fraud department, however, is saying that either you knowingly allowed someone else to use your credentials to secure a fraudulent loan, or your credentials were used without your knowledge. Her attorney leaned in to whisper to her again. She pushed back from the table abruptly. "I need a moment," she said, and left the room. When she returned 15 minutes later, her makeup had been refreshed, but her hands trembled slightly. "I'm prepared to accept a settlement that gives Michael the house and waives any claim to his consulting business," she said without preamble. "I keep my personal accounts, my vehicle, and my retirement fund from the marketing firm." My attorney looked at me questioningly. I nodded once. "We can agree to those terms," my attorney said, "with the addition that Mrs. Parker assumes full responsibility for any debts incurred jointly with Mr. Reynolds, and that Mr. Parker retains full ownership of all investment accounts established before the separation date." Jennifer's attorney started to object, but she placed a hand on his arm. "I agree," she said quietly. As the attorneys drafted the preliminary agreement, Jennifer and I sat in awkward silence. Finally, she spoke. "You knew, didn't you, about Alex using my login for the credit line?" I met her gaze steadily. "I suspected. The bank confirmed. He said it was a surprise, that he was securing our future." I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like gloating or pity, neither of which I wanted to offer. "He's gone," she continued after a moment. "Took what was left of the emergency fund and disappeared when the bank started calling about fraud alerts." I nodded, unsurprised. "I'm sorry that happened to you." She laughed bitterly. "Are you really?" "Yes," I said simply. "Despite everything, I never wanted you to be hurt. I just couldn't let myself be destroyed in the process." She studied me for a long moment. "I never understood you, did I? All those years, I thought you were just there, reliable, predictable. I never saw what was beneath the surface." "You never looked," I replied without rancor. "We both made choices." 2 months later, I stood in the empty hillside house, listening to the echo of my footsteps on the hardwood floors. The divorce was finalized. The house was on the market. I'd moved to a comfortable condo closer to downtown, with a small yard for Scout and space for a home office. David arrived to help me pack the last few boxes from the garage. "Heard anything from Jennifer?" he asked as we sorted through tools. "She's in Arizona now," I said. "Started over with a marketing position at a resort. Her social media shows lots of sunset photos and inspirational quotes." "And Reynolds?" "No idea. Not my concern anymore." We worked in companionable silence for a while. "I'm thinking of taking some time off," I said eventually. "Maybe head to the Oregon coast for a few weeks. Rent a cabin, do some hiking with Scout." "That sounds perfect," David replied. "You've earned some peace." That evening, after David left with the last of the boxes, I walked through the empty house one final time. Each room held memories, some good, some painful, all now part of a chapter that was closing. I stepped out onto the back deck and watched the sun setting over the Portland skyline. In the morning, I would hand the keys to the real estate agent and drive to Cannon Beach. No schedule, no expectations, no balance sheet of emotional debts and credits to maintain. I thought about the last years of my marriage, how I'd noticed the signs but chosen to look away, how I'd prepared for the worst while hoping for the best, how when the moment came, I'd been ready not out of cynicism but out of self-preservation. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt clear-sighted, perhaps for the first time in years. As I locked the door for the final time, I realized that my father had been right all along. The foundation matters more than the facade. And sometimes the strongest foundation is the one you build for yourself when everything else has been swept away. I first met Jennifer Walsh at a charity fundraiser for Portland Children's Hospital. I wasn't even supposed to be there. That Night, I'd agreed to fill in for a colleague who'd fallen ill at the last minute. The event was held at the Portland Art Museum, all crystal chandeliers and polished marble, filled with the city's elite in formal wear, sipping champagne and bidding astronomical amounts on auction items they didn't need. I was standing alone, near a sculpture, nursing a glass of mediocre wine, when Jennifer approached. "You look about as comfortable as I feel," she said, her smile transforming an ordinary observation into an intimate confidence. She wore a navy blue dress that seemed to have been designed specifically for her dark hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. "First time at one of these?" "That obvious?" I replied, finding myself smiling back. "You're not constantly checking to see who's watching you," she explained. "Dead giveaway. Everyone else here is performing, you're just present." Something about the way she said it, like being authentically present was a rare quality she treasured, made me extend my hand. "Michael Parker." Jennifer Walsh. Her handshake was firm, confident. "Marketing director at Cascade Creative. And you?" "Risk assessment consultant at Riverfront Financial." She tilted her head. "What does that mean exactly?" "I help banks and financial institutions identify vulnerabilities before they become problems." "So you're professionally paranoid?" she teased. "I prefer strategically cautious," I countered, and she laughed, a genuine laugh that seemed to surprise even her. We spent the rest of the evening together, moving between auction displays and making up elaborate backstories for the other attendees. Jennifer was sharp, observant, unafraid to be slightly irreverent in a setting that demanded reverence. By the time we exchanged numbers at the end of the night, I felt more engaged and alive than I had in months. Our first proper date was the following weekend, dinner at a small Vietnamese restaurant in the Pearl District. Jennifer arrived slightly late, apologizing profusely. "Client emergency," she explained. "The joys of working in marketing. Everyone's problem becomes your deadline." I waved off her apology. "I understand completely. My entire career is built around other people's problems." Over spring rolls and P.O., we discovered shared interests in independent films, hiking the Columbia River Gorge, and a mild addiction to true crime podcasts. Jennifer spoke passionately about her work, the creative challenges of building brand identities, the satisfaction of seeing a campaign take off. "What about you?" she asked. "What drew you to risk assessment?" I considered the question carefully. Most people asked out of politeness, not genuine interest. "I like finding the patterns that others miss," I said finally. "The small inconsistencies that signal larger problems. There's something satisfying about identifying a vulnerability before it can cause damage." Jennifer studied me thoughtfully. "That's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Something about liking numbers, or job security, or falling into it accidentally." She smiled. "Instead, you're practically a financial detective." No one had ever framed my work that way before. Most people, including my ex-girlfriend, who'd ended our relationship with the devastating assessment that I was pathologically risk-averse, found my profession tedious. Jennifer made it sound noble, even exciting. We began seeing each other regularly after that. Jennifer introduced me to her world of gallery openings, networking events, and marketing industry parties. I took her hiking, to jazz clubs, and to my favorite bookstore with the resident cat who supervised all purchases. We fit together in unexpected ways, her spontaneity balancing my caution, my steadiness anchoring her ambition. 3 months into our relationship, I invited Jennifer to meet my family at our monthly Sunday dinner. My parents had been married for 40 years, the kind of solid, undemonstrative partnership that formed the backbone of my understanding of commitment. My brother David was 5 years older, married to his college sweetheart Karen, with twins. daughters who were just entering their preteen years of glorious awkwardness. I was nervous about bringing Jennifer. My previous girlfriend had found my family stifling and conventional, but Jennifer charmed them all effortlessly. She helped my mother in the kitchen, discussed cybersecurity with David, who worked in IT, and somehow got my usually reserved father talking about his time in the Coast Guard. Later, as we drove back to her apartment, Jennifer reached over and squeezed my hand. "I like your family," she said, "especially your dad. He's got that quiet strength thing going on. I see where you get it from." "They liked you too," I replied, genuinely relieved. "Even Dad, who usually takes years to warm up to anyone." "It's because I asked real questions and actually listened to the answers," she said matter-of-factly. "People can tell when you're genuinely interested versus just being polite." It was an insightful observation, the kind that made me increasingly certain that Jennifer understood people in a way I never would. Where I saw patterns in numbers and behaviors, she read the emotions and motivations beneath them. We were different types of observers, complementary in our perspectives. 6 months into our relationship, Jennifer was offered a significant promotion at Cascade Creative, Senior Marketing Director with a substantial salary increase and more client responsibility. We celebrated at an upscale restaurant overlooking the Willamette River, and afterward, walking along the waterfront, she turned to me with unusual seriousness. "This promotion means longer hours, more travel, more client dinners," she said. "I want to make sure you're okay with that. My last relationship ended because he couldn't handle my ambition." I appreciated her directness. "I admire your drive," I told her honestly, "and my work keeps me busy too. As long as we make time for what matters, we'll figure out the rest." Her relief was palpable. "That's exactly what I needed to hear." She kissed me, then added, "You know what would make this easier if we lived together. My lease is up next month." The suggestion caught me off guard, not because I hadn't thought about it, but because I'd been methodically analyzing the pros and cons, planning to bring it up in another month or two. Jennifer's approach was more direct. Identify what you want, ask for it, move forward. 2 weeks later, she moved into my Selwood apartment. The space, previously organized with minimalist efficiency, was transformed by her presence. Colorful throw pillows appeared on my grey sofa. Art replaced my framed maps. Scented candles and fresh flowers became regular features. Our shared space became livelier, warmer, more inviting. Living together revealed new dimensions of Jennifer. She was ambitiously untidy, leaving trails of half-finished projects and clothing draped over furniture. She worked in intense bursts of energy, sometimes forgetting to eat. She was impatient with processes, preferring results, and she was unfailingly generous, remembering colleagues' birthdays, sending care packages to her parents in California, bringing me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. I found myself adapting, becoming more spontaneous, less rigid in my routines. Jennifer, in turn, adopted some of my organizational systems, acknowledging their usefulness in managing her increasingly demanding career. After a year of living together, on the anniversary of our first meeting, I proposed during a weekend trip to Cannon Beach. I'd planned it meticulously. Private dinner reservation, ring carefully selected, speech rehearsed. But when the moment came, standing on the beach at sunset with Jennifer laughing as she tried to keep her hair from whipping in the coastal wind, all my careful preparations dissolved. "Marry me," I said simply, holding out the ring. Jennifer's eyes widened. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, something like calculation crossed her face. Then she was throwing her arms around me, saying, "Yes, yes, of course, yes," as the waves crashed around our feet. We married 6 months later in a ceremony that reflected Jennifer's growing professional status. Elegant, photogenic, with just enough personal touches to feel intimate. My father pulled me aside during the reception, a rare moment of affection. from a man who typically expressed his emotions through actions rather than words. "She's a force of nature, your Jennifer," he said, watching as my new wife charmed a group of colleagues. "Just make sure your partner's in the journey, not just passengers on her train." I nodded, touched by his concern, but confident in our future. "We balance each other," I assured him. He squeezed my shoulder. "Good. That's how it should be." Our first 2 years of marriage were a whirlwind of career advancements and life milestones. Jennifer's client roster expanded to include national brands. My risk assessment practice gained recognition for identifying vulnerabilities in several financial institutions before they could be exploited. We purchased our starter home in Selwood, adopted Scout from a local shelter, and began talking about children in a year or two, once things settled down. The shift happened so gradually I almost missed it, despite my professional commitment to noticing patterns. Jennifer's networking events became more frequent, extending later into the evenings. Her work travel increased: Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York. She began a fitness regimen with a personal trainer, transforming her already fit body into something more sculpted, more camera-ready. "It's all about personal branding," she explained, when I commented on her increasingly curated social media presence. "Clients expect a certain image, especially in my industry." I accepted this as the natural evolution of her career. After all, my own professional reputation was built on being meticulous, reliable, discreet. We were both adapting to the demands of success. When Jennifer suggested upgrading to a larger home in the prestigious hillside neighborhood, "It's about having space for entertaining clients, Michael. These connections matter in my field." I expressed concerns about extending ourselves financially. The conversation that followed was our first significant disagreement. "You assess risk for a living," Jennifer said, her frustration evident. "But sometimes you're so focused on what might go wrong that you miss opportunities. This house is an investment in our future." "It's also a significant financial commitment," I countered. "One that limits our flexibility if circumstances change." "What circumstances? We're both doing well. Our careers are expanding. This is exactly the time to leverage our success." In the end, I agreed to the move, telling myself that relationships require compromise, that Jennifer's instincts had proven sound in the past. The new house was undeniably beautiful. A modernist structure with walls of glass overlooking the city, a gourmet kitchen Jennifer rarely used, and a dedicated home office for each of us. The mortgage was substantial, but manageable, assuming both our incomes remained steady. I restructured some investments, set up automatic transfers to ensure our emergency fund remained robust, and updated our financial contingency plans. Precautions, not predictions. Security, not suspicion. 3 years into our marriage, my father was diagnosed with aggressive prostate cancer. The prognosis was poor from the beginning. The disease had already metastasized before symptoms appeared. My mother, typically the family's emotional center, seemed to collapse inward, leaving David and me to manage medical consultations and practical arrangements. Jennifer was supportive initially, accompanying me to family dinners and sending elaborate flower arrangements to my parents' home. But as my father's condition deteriorated, requiring more of my time and emotional energy, her patience waned. "I understand he's your father," she said one evening after I'd cancelled our plans to attend a client event with her. "But you've been to the hospital every day this week. Your mother and David are there. Can't you take one night off?" I was surprised by her lack of empathy. "He's dying, Jennifer. Everything else can wait." "Life doesn't stop because someone is sick," she countered. "My biggest client is at this event tonight. This matters for my career." "Then you should go," I said quietly. "I need to be with my family." She left, returning home well after midnight, slightly intoxicated and effusively apologetic. I'm sorry, Michael, you're right. Family comes first. I just get so caught up in work sometimes. I accepted her apology, too exhausted for conflict, but something had shifted between us, a small fracture in the foundation I couldn't quite name. My father died 3 weeks later, on a crisp autumn morning with sunlight streaming through the hospital windows. In his final lucid conversation with me, he'd gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Remember what builds a good life, son," he said, his voice raspy from disuse. "Not things, not status, connection, purpose, integrity. Everything else is just decoration." At the funeral, Jennifer was perfectly appropriate, elegant in understated black, offering comfort to my mother, managing the caterers for the reception afterward with quiet efficiency. But I noticed she spent more time on her phone than engaged with my grieving family, slipping away for work calls that seemed suspiciously timed to coincide with the less photogenic moments of mourning. That evening, after the last relatives had departed and my mother had finally fallen asleep in the guest room of our home, I found Jennifer in our kitchen, scrolling through social media. "Thank you for handling everything today," I said, pouring myself a glass of the whiskey my father had favored. "Of course," she replied, not looking up from her phone. "That's what partners do." I waited for her to say more, to ask how I was feeling, to acknowledge the weight of the day. When she didn't, I asked, "Did you even like him? My father?" She looked up, surprised. "What kind of question is that? Of course I liked him. He was your father. That's not what I asked." Jennifer set down her phone with deliberate care. "I respected him. He was old-fashioned but genuine. Not everyone in this world is." "He had concerns about us," I said, the whiskey and grief making me more direct than usual, "about our balance." "Michael, this isn't the time to rehash family dynamics. You're exhausted and emotional." "When is the time then? Because lately, it feels like we're living parallel lives rather than a shared one." She softened, coming around the counter to embrace me. "We're both busy, that's all. Once things settle down, we'll rebalance. Take a vacation, maybe. Just the two of us." I wanted to believe her, needed to believe her. So I nodded and let the moment pass. Another small fracture left unrepaired. In the months following my father's death, I immersed myself in work, finding comfort in the order and logic of risk assessment. Jennifer's career continued its upward trajectory, with a new promotion that came with equity in the agency. We established a rhythm of sorts, ships passing in our beautiful house, leaving notes about schedules and takeout orders. On the rare evenings we were both home, conversations centered on practical matters, house maintenance, car services, upcoming social obligations, the deeper discussions that had characterized our early relationship, about books we'd read, ideas we were exploring, dreams for the future, had gradually disappeared without either of us explicitly noting their absence. One night, returning early from a client dinner that had ended sooner than expected, I found Jennifer in her home office, hastily ending a video call as I entered. "You're home early," she said, closing her laptop with a casualness that felt rehearsed. "Meeting wrapped up quickly," I replied, noticing the glass of wine on her desk, the carefully applied lipstick that hadn't been there when I'd left. "Work call?" "Just wrapping up some details for the Seattle conference next month," she said, standing and stretching. "You know how these event planners are, a million questions at the last minute." I nodded, not pushing further, but that night, lying awake beside Jennifer's sleeping form, I found myself wondering when we'd started keeping small secrets from each other. When had it become normal to not fully share our days, our thoughts, our concerns? The next morning, I tried to dismiss these thoughts as stress-induced paranoia. Jennifer was ambitious, dedicated to her career. Her increasing travel, her late-night work calls, her growing preoccupation with her appearance, all could be reasonably explained by her professional demands. The alternative explanations felt both melodramatic and cliched. Still, something. My father had taught me about risk assessment kept surfacing in my mind. The obvious explanation is often correct. But when it isn't, the cost of assumption can be catastrophic. A week later, I was working late at the office when my phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Don't wait up. Client dinner running late. Crash at Megan's if it goes too long." Megan was Jennifer's colleague at the agency, a fellow marketing director who lived downtown. They occasionally shared rides to work events, and Jennifer had stayed at her apartment once or twice when downtown client functions extended into the early hours. I replied with a simple "okay" and returned to my analysis of a client's security protocols. Hours later, driving home through a light rain, I impulsively took the exit that led downtown rather than continuing toward our hillside home. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that checking up on my wife was beneath both of us, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The restaurant Jennifer had mentioned in an earlier text was dark when I drove past, clearly closed for hours. I circled the block, telling myself there was a reasonable explanation. They'd moved to another venue, or Jennifer had the name wrong. But the knot in my stomach tightened. I parked and called her cell. It went straight to voicemail. I texted, "Heading home. You still out?" No reply came as I sat in my car, watching raindrops trace patterns on the windshield. After 20 minutes, I drove to Megan's apartment building and sat in the parking lot, feeling increasingly foolish. What was I doing? Spying on my wife based on a vague feeling. This wasn't who I wanted to be. As I was about to leave, a rideshare pulled up. Jennifer emerged alone, looking fresh and alert despite the late hour. She entered the building using what appeared to be her own keycard. I sat there for a long moment, processing what I'd seen. Nothing definitively wrong. Jennifer was indeed at Megan's, as she'd said, yet something felt off about the scene. The careful way she'd checked her appearance before entering, the fact that she appeared energized rather than exhausted after what should have been a grueling day of meetings, followed by a lengthy client dinner. Driving home, I catalogued possibilities. Jennifer could be having an affair. She could be dealing with work stress she didn't want to share. She could be planning a surprise for me that required secrecy, or she could simply be maintaining healthy boundaries between her work and personal life. As a risk assessor, I knew that jumping to worst-case scenarios without sufficient evidence was as dangerous as ignoring warning signs. But I also knew that patterns matter, and something in our pattern had changed. The following weekend, Jennifer announced she needed to attend a marketing conference in Seattle. It's last minute, but they've had a cancellation and offered me a speaking slot. It's too good an opportunity to pass up. "When do you leave?" I asked, careful to keep my tone neutral. "Tomorrow afternoon. I'll be back Tuesday evening." She showed me the conference website on her phone. Legitimate, well-established, aligned with her professional focus. "Sounds like a great opportunity," I said. "Need a ride to the airport?" She seemed momentarily surprised by my easy acceptance. "That would be great, actually. My flight's at 2:30. I drove her to Portland International the next day, kissed her goodbye at departures, and watched her enter the terminal, pulling her designer carry-on. That evening, she texted a photo of her conference badge against the backdrop of the Seattle skyline from her hotel room. Everything appeared exactly as it should be. But sometimes, things being exactly as they should be is itself a pattern worth noting. That night, I made a decision I'd been contemplating since my father's funeral. Not out of suspicion, I told myself, but out of prudence. The same prudence that led me to create emergency preparedness kits and maintain substantial insurance policies. I opened my laptop and created a new spreadsheet titled Phoenix Protocol, named after the mythical bird that rises from the ashes of destruction. The sheet contained 3 columns: asset, protection strategy, and implementation timeline. I began methodically listing our financial connections: joint checking, savings, investment accounts, credit cards, mortgage, car loans. For each, I noted the current balance, ownership structure, and potential vulnerabilities. The exercise felt simultaneously disloyal and necessary. I wasn't planning for divorce. I was creating contingencies. The difference seemed important, though I couldn't have articulated exactly why. The next morning, I called my brother David, who'd recently started his own digital security consultancy after years in corporate IT. "I need some advice," I said, after exchanging pleasantries. "Professional advice? Shoot," he replied. "What's the best way to monitor your own financial accounts for unauthorized activity? Not just the standard alerts banks offer, but something more comprehensive." David was quiet for a moment. "This about a client, or personal?" "Personal," I admitted, just trying to be proactive about security. Another pause. "Mike, is everything okay with you and Jennifer?" "Everything's fine," I said automatically. Then, with more honesty, "I think everything's fine. I just want to make sure our financial house is in order." "After what happened with Dad, that makes sense," David said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Tell you what, come by the office tomorrow. I'll show you some monitoring systems that might give you peace of mind." The following day, David walked me through several options for comprehensive financial monitoring. We settled on a customized solution that would alert me to any unusual activity across all our accounts, unusual being defined by algorithms that learned our normal spending patterns. "This will flag anything that deviates from established habits," David explained. "Large withdrawals, new account applications, changes to beneficiaries, basic identity protection stuff." "Perfect," I said, feeling both relief and a lingering discomfort at taking these measures without Jennifer's knowledge. "This is just precautionary, for both our protection." David studied me for a moment. "You'd tell me if there was something more going on, right? If you needed real help." "Of course," I assured him, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. As we finished setting up the monitoring system, David handed me a sealed envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Emergency contact information for my attorney, financial advisor, and digital security specialist, just in case." "In case of what?" David's expression was uncharacteristically serious. "In case you ever need to execute a financial contingency plan quickly." "You think I'm being paranoid?" I said, half statement, half question. "I think you're being a risk assessor," he replied, "and I think there's a reason for that." I tucked the envelope into my jacket pocket. "Let's call it Protocol Phoenix." Dad would appreciate the mythology reference. David nodded. "Phoenix it is, but let's hope it stays theoretical." Jennifer returned from Seattle energized and full of stories about the conference, connections made, insights gained, opportunities identified. She brought me a handcrafted coffee mug from Pike Place Market and suggested we plan a weekend getaway to Seattle together soon. "The view from my hotel was incredible," she said, showing me photos on her phone. "We should stay there when we visit." Life resumed its normal rhythm. Jennifer traveled for work. I analyzed risk factors for clients. We maintained our beautiful home, walked scout in the evenings, occasionally entertained colleagues and friends. From the outside, we appeared to be living the ideal upper-middle-class professional life. But beneath the surface, something had changed. The monitoring system David had helped me set up began identifying patterns I might otherwise have missed. Small withdrawals from our joint savings account, always under $1,000. Always timed around Jennifer's business trips. Credit card charges from restaurants and hotels in Seattle on weekends, when Jennifer had claimed to be at local retreats with her wellness group. The most concerning pattern emerged 6 months after my father's death. Jennifer had opened a separate savings account at a different bank, using our home address but only her name on the account. Small transfers were regularly moving from our joint account to this new account. Nothing substantial enough to trigger standard banking alerts, but significant when viewed cumulatively. I said nothing about these discoveries, partly because confrontation without a complete picture felt premature, partly because I wasn't ready to face what these patterns might mean for our marriage, and partly because, as my monitoring expanded, I realized I needed more comprehensive protection before any potential confrontation. With David's guidance, I quietly began restructuring aspects of my financial life. I established a separate emergency fund at a bank Jennifer didn't use. I created a small consulting LLC that could receive payments directly, distinct from my primary employment. I documented unusual expenses and unexplained absences. I updated beneficiaries on retirement accounts and insurance policies, all while hoping I'd never need these precautions, all while telling myself this was normal financial prudence, not preparation for marital dissolution. The morning Jennifer mentioned the marketing conference in Seattle, the one that would ultimately lead to the emptying of our emergency fund, I was reviewing the latest Phoenix Protocol update with David over coffee at a downtown shop. She's been making larger withdrawals, I explained, showing him the transaction history on my tablet. And there's a pattern of hotel charges in Seattle that don't align with her stated business trips. David reviewed the data with professional detachment. What does your gut tell you? I stared into my coffee. That something isn't right. But I don't have definitive proof of what that something is. Do you need definitive proof? He asked, or do you just need to protect yourself? Both, I replied. I can't make decisions based on incomplete information. David nodded, understanding the risk assessor's dilemma. Then let's complete phase 2 of Phoenix, just in case. That afternoon we finalized the contingency protocols. All joint accounts would have enhanced fraud alerts. All separate accounts would be secured with additional verification steps. All major assets would be documented with clear ownership trails. All digital access would be monitored for unusual login patterns. Not because I expected disaster, but because preparing for unlikely scenarios was what I did professionally, and increasingly personally. I feel like I'm betraying her trust, I admitted to David as we completed the preparations, setting all this up in secret. Do you trust her completely right now? He asked. The question hung between us, demanding an honesty I'd been avoiding. No, I finally said. I don't think I do. Then you're not betraying trust, David replied. You're acknowledging its absence. As I drove home that evening, I remembered something my father had told me years ago when I'd first entered the field of risk assessment. The best security isn't the one that stops an attack. It's the one that makes an attack too costly to attempt. I wondered if that principle applied to marriages as well as financial systems. If making betrayal costly through preparation could somehow prevent it from happening. It seemed unlikely, but I held on to the hope anyway. That night, Jennifer mentioned the Seattle conference over dinner, describing it as a last-minute opportunity too valuable to miss. I nodded and offered to drive her to the airport, my face revealing nothing of what I knew or suspected. You're the best, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. So supportive of my career. Not every husband would be. I smiled and squeezed back, wondering if this moment of connection was genuine or performative, wondering when exactly. I'd started questioning the authenticity of my wife's simplest gestures. As I helped her pack the next morning, I noticed the new lingerie tucked discreetly into her suitcase, the expensive perfume she rarely wore at home, the carefully selected outfits that seemed excessive for a professional conference. I said nothing. I drove her to the airport. I kissed her goodbye. I returned home to an empty house and activated the final elements of Protocol Phoenix, hoping it would prove unnecessary while suspecting It would not. 3 days later, the bank alert came through, followed by Marcus's courtesy call, followed by Jennifer's text about extending her conference stay and needing the emergency fund for an unexpected opportunity. And despite all my preparation, despite all the warning signs, despite the patterns I'd professionally and personally identified, the confirmation still felt like a physical blow, like realizing the disaster scenario you'd meticulously planned for was actually unfolding in real time. Jennifer had emptied our emergency fund to start a new life with someone else. The bank had already flagged it as fraud. And now I had decisions to make about how to respond, not just as a risk assessor, but as a husband facing the collapse of his marriage. The morning after Jennifer's text, I woke before dawn, my body operating on autopilot despite having slept. Only 3 hours. I made coffee, strong and black, and sat at the kitchen island of our hillside home, watching the sun gradually illuminate the Portland skyline through the wall of windows Jennifer had insisted were worth the extra $75,000 during renovation. The view was undeniably spectacular, perfect for the Instagram photos Jennifer regularly posted, with captions about morning inspiration and gratitude for this beautiful life. The irony wasn't lost on me. I opened my laptop and navigated to our bank's secure portal. The transaction history showed the exact moment of betrayal. 7:42 p.m. yesterday, $27,498 transferred from our joint emergency savings to Jennifer's personal account at Pacific Northwest Bank. The account she'd opened 6 months ago without mentioning it to me. The account my monitoring system had flagged immediately. With methodical precision, I began implementing Phase 3 of Protocol Phoenix. First, I activated the fraud alert documentation that Marcus had prepared per my request, officially contesting the transfer as unauthorized. This would temporarily freeze both accounts pending investigation, standard procedure for potential financial fraud. Next, I logged into my separate email account, one Jennifer didn't know existed, and sent the pre-drafted message to my attorney, Claire Donovan, with the subject line, Phoenix Activation. The email contained documentation of Jennifer's recent financial activities, including the pattern of withdrawals, the secret account, and last night's emergency fund transfer. Attached was the request to file for divorce, citing financial misconduct, along with the detailed financial reconstruction David and I had prepared. Then I called David, who answered immediately despite the early hour. "It's happening," I said, without preamble. "The emergency fund?" he asked, instantly alert. "All of it. Transferred last night. She texted that she's extending her conference stay and needed it for an emergency." David exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry, Mike. Even when you see it coming, it still hits hard. I've activated the legal and financial protocols," I continued, my voice steady. "I need you to handle the digital security component. Change all passwords, secure the cloud accounts, activate the monitoring on her devices. Consider it done. What about your physical location? Are you staying at the house?" I glanced around the kitchen, seeing the space with new clarity. The expensive appliances Jennifer rarely used. The designer furniture selected more for appearance than comfort. "No, I'll check into the Riverside Hotel downtown. Jennifer would never look for me there." Too budget-friendly for her taste? David's attempt at levity was appreciated. "Exactly. I'll take what I need for a few days along with the essential documents from the safe. Can you check on Scout this afternoon? He has enough food and water, but he'll need a walk." "Of course. And Mike, remember, this isn't a failure on your part. You did everything right." After ending the call, I went upstairs and packed efficiently. 3 changes of clothes, toiletries, laptop, chargers, and the portable hard drive containing all our financial records. From the hidden safe in my closet, I retrieved our passports, insurance policies, property deeds, and the thumb drive containing Protocol Phoenix in its entirety. As I moved through our bedroom, I noticed what I hadn't before. Jennifer's side of the closet had subtle gaps where certain items should have been. Her favorite casual clothes, the expensive athleisure wear she claimed was just for comfort, the designer weekend bag she'd purchased last month. None of this was packed for a typical business conference. She'd been planning this. I paused at the bedside table, picking up the framed photo from our anniversary trip to Hawaii 2 years ago. In the image, we stood on a beach at sunset. Jennifer's smile brilliant, her body angled slightly away from mine even as I held her close. I'd thought it was just an awkward moment captured by the photographer. Now I wondered if it had been unconscious body language revealing a deeper truth. I left the photo behind and headed downstairs. Scout followed me to the door, his expressive eyes questioning the disruption to our routine. "I'll be back for you, buddy," I promised, kneeling to scratch behind his ears. "David will check on you today. This is temporary." I didn't look back as I drove away from the house, navigating the winding roads of the hillside neighborhood toward downtown Portland. The morning commuters were just starting to fill the streets, everyone rushing toward their day with purpose and direction. I wondered how many of them were also living lives built on foundations they couldn't quite trust. At the Riverside Hotel, I checked in efficiently, requesting a room overlooking the Willamette River. The desk clerk assigned me to the 11th floor, far from the conference facilities where Jennifer might potentially attend events. The room was simple, clean, and anonymous, exactly what I needed. I set up my laptop on the small desk and began the next phase of my response. First, I transferred funds from my LLC account to a new personal account at a separate bank, ensuring I had immediate access to resources that couldn't be frozen in the divorce proceedings. Then I documented the current status of all joint accounts, taking screenshots of balances and recent transactions. At 8:30 a.m., I received a call from Claire Donovan's office. "Michael, I've reviewed your email and attachments," Claire said, her voice professional and focused. "The documentation is thorough. We can file for divorce today with the financial misconduct provisions you've outlined. Before proceeding, I need to confirm, are you certain this is what you want?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation. The emergency fund transfer was the final confirmation. "Understood. We'll file this morning and request emergency orders to freeze all joint assets pending court review. Given the evidence of financial misconduct, we have strong grounds. Your preparation has made this much more straightforward than most cases." "I handle." "That's what risk assessment is for," I said, feeling a hollow satisfaction at having predicted this outcome so accurately. "One more thing," Claire added. "Have you had any contact with Jennifer since her text about the emergency fund?" "No," I replied, "noted, safe travels and nothing else." "Perfect. Keep all communication minimal and documented. Forward any messages directly to me. If she calls, let it go to voicemail. We want to maintain control of the narrative and timing." After ending the call, I turned to the practical matters at hand. I forwarded my work email and calls to my mobile, sent a message to my assistant Sarah explaining I would be working remotely for a few days due to a personal matter, and set up automatic replies directing any urgent client issues to my colleague, Thomas. Then I made the call I'd been dreading. My mother answered on the third ring. "Michael, is everything all right? You never called this early." I took a deep breath. "Mum, I have some news. Jennifer and I are separating. I've filed for divorce." The silence stretched for several seconds. "I see," she finally said, her voice carefully neutral. "May I ask what happened?" "The short version is that she's been diverting money from our accounts for months and just cleaned out our emergency fund while supposedly at a conference in Seattle. She's with someone else." Another pause. "I'm so sorry, Michael. Are you okay? Do you need anything?" "I'm okay. I'm staying at a hotel downtown for now. I had prepared for this possibility. Your father would be proud of your foresight, she said softly, though sad it was necessary. We talked for a few more minutes, my mother offering practical support rather than empty platitudes. When we ended the call, I felt both the weight of disappointment and the comfort of family connection. At 10:15 a.m., I received an email notification that the divorce petition had been filed. By 11:30 a.m., the emergency asset freeze had been granted, effective immediately. All joint accounts, credit cards, and investment portfolios were now legally protected from further withdrawals or changes pending the divorce proceedings. I sent a brief text to David. Phase 3 complete. Assets secured. His reply came instantly. Digital security locked down. We'll check on Scout at 2. You hanging in there? Managing, I responded truthfully. At 12:45 p.m., the first call from Jennifer came through. I watched my phone screen as her name appeared, feeling a strange detachment as I declined the call. 3 more calls followed in quick succession, then a flurry of texts. Michael, my card was declined at the hotel. Are you getting my calls? This is urgent. The bank says our accounts are frozen. What's going on? Call me now. I forwarded the messages to Claire without replying, then muted notifications from Jennifer's number. Whatever emergency she was fabricating would have to wait. She had made her choice. Now she would face the consequences. I spent the afternoon reviewing client files, focusing on work as a form of meditation. The familiar patterns of data analysis and risk projection provided a structure my personal life currently lacked. By 4:30 p.m., I had cleared my immediate work responsibilities and decided to take a walk along the riverfront to clear my head. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of the river and fallen leaves. I walked without conscious direction, my mind cataloguing the events that had led to this moment. The signs I'd noticed but rationalized away, the preparations I'd made while hoping they'd be unnecessary, the calm I now felt in the midst of what should have been emotional chaos. David called as I was returning to the hotel. Scout has been walked and fed. Your house is secure. And Jennifer called me 3 times in the last hour. What did she want? To know where you are, what's happening with the accounts, whether I'm in on this with you. What did you tell her? That I have no information to share, and she should contact her attorney if she has financial concerns. She didn't take it well. I could imagine. Jennifer's temper, while rarely directed at me during our marriage, was legendary among those who disappointed or challenged her professionally. Thank you for dealing with that and for taking care of Scout. No problem. How are you really doing, Mike? I considered the question as I entered the hotel lobby. I'm not sure yet. I know. This was coming. I prepared for it extensively, but actually living it feels surreal. That's normal. The planning part was intellectual. Now it's emotional reality. The strangest part is that I don't feel devastated. I feel clear, like I've been looking through a smudged window for years, and someone finally cleaned it. Dad would understand that feeling, David said. He always valued clarity above comfort. That night, alone in my hotel room, I allowed myself to fully process what was happening. My marriage was over. The life Jennifer and I had built, the home, the social circle, the future plans, none of it had been as solid as it appeared. The image we presented to the world had been carefully constructed, primarily by Jennifer, with my silent complicity. I wondered when exactly we had stopped being partners and become performers in our own lives. When had maintaining appearances become more important than maintaining connection? Had there been a specific moment I could have identified and addressed, or had it been a gradual erosion, imperceptible until the foundation collapsed? At 11:32 p.m., my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. This is Jennifer. Had to use hotel phone. My cards are all declined, bank accounts frozen, hotel threatening to call security if payment isn't resolved by morning. Michael, you can't do this to me. This is cruel. I forwarded the message to Claire without responding. 10 minutes later, another text arrived. I know you're seeing these messages. At least tell me what's going on. I deserve that much. The assumption of deserving anything after emptying our emergency fund was so characteristically Jennifer that I almost laughed. Instead, I turned off my phone and went to bed, sleeping soundly for the first time in months. The next morning, I arrived at my office before 7 a.m., preferring to establish a normal work environment before any potential confrontation. My assistant Sarah looked up in surprise when I walked in. "Good morning," I said casually, setting my coffee on my desk. "Any urgent messages yesterday?" "Just the usual client follow-ups," she replied, studying me with concern. "But Jennifer called here several times. She seemed quite upset." "I imagine she did," I said, not offering further explanation. "If she calls again, please take a message and let me know. I'm in meetings most of the day." Sarah nodded, though her expression suggested she had questions she wasn't asking. "The quarterly risk assessments for Portland Federal are on your desk for review." "Thank you. I'll get to those right away." I immersed myself in work, reviewing client risk profiles and preparing recommendations with methodical focus. The familiar routine provided structure and purpose, a professional identity separate from the personal dissolution occurring in parallel. At 11:15 a.m., Sarah buzzed my office. "Michael, Jennifer is here. She's quite insistent on seeing you." I took a deep breath, preparing for the confrontation I'd known was inevitable. "Please show her in." Jennifer entered my office like a force of nature. Designer sunglasses pushed back on her head, wearing the tailored blazer and slim jeans that comprised her casual power look for non-client days. Despite clearly having traveled directly from Seattle, her appearance was immaculate. Hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, jewelry strategically minimal. She closed the door behind her with controlled precision, then turned to face me. "What the hell is going on, Michael? My cards are declined, accounts frozen, hotel threatening to call police for non-payment. I had to borrow money from a colleague to get home." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Please sit down." "I don't want to sit down," she snapped. "I want answers." "You transferred nearly $28,000 from our joint emergency fund without authorization," I said calmly. "The bank flagged it as potential fraud. I confirmed it was unauthorized. These are the natural consequences." Her expression shifted, the initial anger giving way to calculated charm, a transition I'd seen countless times in our marriage when direct confrontation didn't yield immediate results. "Michael, there's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice softening as she moved around the desk toward me. "The conference presented an amazing investment opportunity that I didn't want to miss. I was going to surprise you with the details when I got back." "Is that why you needed the money?" I asked, maintaining eye contact. "For an investment opportunity at a marketing conference?" "Exactly," she said, relief evident in her posture. "It's a guaranteed return. We can discuss the specifics later, but I needed to move quickly to secure our position." "And the personal account you transferred it to? The one you opened 6 months ago without mentioning it to me?" Her expression faltered briefly before recalibrating. "That was just for convenience. The investment group needed an individual account, not a joint one. It's still our money, Michael." "And Alex Reynolds?" I asked quietly. "Is he part of this investment opportunity too?" The color drained from Jennifer's face. She stepped back, putting distance between us. "How do you know that name?" "That's not important right now. What matters is that you've been funding a relationship with him using our joint accounts for months, and yesterday you attempted to move our entire emergency fund to continue that arrangement." She recovered quickly, shifting strategies again. You've been spying on me, monitoring my spending, my communications. That's controlling and obsessive, Michael. No, Jennifer. I've been protecting myself from financial misconduct. There's a difference. So that's your angle, financial misconduct. Her laugh was brittle. After 12 years of marriage, you're reducing this to a banking dispute. You reduced it to that when you emptied our emergency savings to start a new life with someone else, I countered, keeping my voice level. Everything else is just context. She paced the office, recalibrating her approach. Fine. Yes. I've been seeing Alex. Our marriage has been effectively over for years, Michael. You're always working, always in your head rather than in our relationship. Alex understands me. He sees me. Does he see your money too? Because his business ventures seem to require a lot of funding for someone supposedly successful. Her eyes narrowed. Don't you dare judge him. At least he's passionate about something. When was the last time you showed passion for anything, including me? This isn't about passion, Jennifer. It's about trust and honesty, both of which are clearly broken. So what now? She demanded. You've frozen our accounts, locked me out of our finances. What's your end game here? Punishment. I shook my head. Protection. I'm protecting what's mine after you decided to take what wasn't yours alone to take. She laughed bitterly. Always so measured, so controlled, even now. Does anything actually touch you, Michael? For the first time, I allowed emotion to enter my voice. Finding out my wife of 12 years used our emergency savings to start a new life with someone else. Yes, Jennifer. That touched me. She had the grace to look momentarily discomfited. Then her chin came up defiantly. I want half of everything. That's my right. Half of what's in our joint names, certainly, I agreed. But you seem to be under the impression that's all there is. Confusion flickered across her face. What are you talking about? You'll find out during disclosure, I replied, turning back to my computer. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to finish. This isn't over, she said, grabbing her bag. On that point, I replied without looking up. We're in complete agreement. After Jennifer left, Sarah appeared in my doorway. Are you okay? That sounded intense. I'm fine, I assured her. Just some personal matters to resolve. She nodded, her expression sympathetic. Let me know if you need anything, and I'll screen your calls more carefully today. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. I spent the afternoon finalizing client reports, the familiar rhythm of analyzing risk factors and identifying vulnerabilities, providing a structured counterpoint to the personal turmoil. At 4:30 p.m., Claire called with an update. The emergency. Asset freeze has been extended pending the preliminary hearing, she informed me. Jennifer's attorney has requested immediate discovery of all financial records. They're clearly scrambling to understand the full picture. When will that happen? We have 10 business days to provide documentation, but I'm recommending we submit everything we have within 5. Your preparation gives us an advantage here. The more transparent and organized we appear, the stronger our position. I agree. Send me the list of required documents, and I'll have everything to you by tomorrow. That evening, I returned to the hotel to find a package waiting for me at the front desk. Inside was a folder containing divorce paperwork from Jennifer's newly retained attorney, William Hargrove, a partner at one of Portland's most expensive family law firms, known for aggressive litigation tactics. The cover letter demanded immediate restoration of access to all joint accounts, threatening emergency court intervention for financial abuse if the freeze wasn't lifted within 24 hours. Attached was a lengthy list of assets Hargrove claimed Jennifer was entitled to, including our home, investment portfolios, and even my retirement accounts. I forwarded everything to Claire, who called within the hour. Standard intimidation tactics, she said dismissively. Hargrove always opens with maximum demands and threats. It's theatrical, not substantive. Will the financial abuse claim gain traction? I asked. Not with the documentation we have. The emergency fund transfer alone justifies the temporary freeze, and once we present the pattern of unauthorized diversion to her secret account, any claim of abuse will collapse. What about the division of assets they're demanding? Oregon is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. The court will consider multiple factors, including financial misconduct, when determining what's fair. Your LLC and its assets are likely to remain separate property since they were properly established and maintained. The most significant joint asset is the house, which we'll probably need to sell and divide the proceeds. I have no interest in keeping the house, I assured her. It was always more Jennifer's showcase than our home. Claire's voice softened slightly. Most clients struggle with the asset division, especially the home. Your perspective makes this process more straightforward. Benefits of being a risk assessor, I said. I'm used to evaluating assets objectively. After ending the call, I took a long walk through downtown Portland, eventually finding myself at the waterfront park where Jennifer and I had often spent Sunday afternoons in the early years of our relationship. The memory felt distant now, belonging to different people in a different life. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Scout walked and fed. How are you holding up? Managing, I replied. Jennifer's attorney is making aggressive demands and threats. Expected. What can I do to help? You're already doing it. Just knowing you're handling things at the house is a relief. That's what brothers are for. Want company tonight? Could bring dinner. I considered the offer, tempted by the prospect of connection amid isolation, but something in me needed the solitude, the space to process what was happening without audience or interruption. Appreciate the offer, but I think I need a quiet night. Tomorrow, maybe? Anytime. Just say the word. I returned to the hotel and ordered room service, then spread the Phoenix Protocol documentation across the bed, reviewing our preparation and progress. Phase 3 was nearly complete. Assets secured, legal process initiated, initial confrontation navigated. Soon we would enter Phase 4, negotiation and resolution. At 9:45 p.m., the hotel phone rang. Jennifer, having discovered her calls to my mobile, were being directed to voicemail. I know you're there, Michael, she said when I answered. You can't hide from this conversation forever. I'm not hiding. Jennifer, I'm establishing boundaries. All communication should go through our attorneys now. Boundaries? After 12 years of marriage? That's cold, even for you. Is there something specific you need? I asked, maintaining my composure. Yes, actually. Access to some of our money. My cards are all declined. My rent is due on the apartment in Seattle. I can't even buy groceries. I paused, absorbing this new information. You have an apartment in Seattle? She hesitated, clearly realizing her error. A short-term rental for the conference and some client meetings next week. In your name or yours and Alex's? Another pause. That's not relevant to the immediate issue. I need access to funds, Michael. You can't leave me destitute while the legal process unfolds. That's cruel and unreasonable. Contact your attorney, I replied. He can request emergency support through proper channels. By the time that happens, I could be evicted. Is that what you want? To humiliate me? What I want, I said carefully, is to follow the legal process we're now both committed to. Your attorney has my attorney's contact information. Good night, Jennifer. I hung up before she could respond, then immediately emailed Claire, documenting the conversation and the revelation about the Seattle apartment. Another piece of evidence confirming what I'd already known but couldn't quite bring myself to fully acknowledge until now. Jennifer had been planning her exit for months. establishing a parallel life while maintaining the facade of our marriage. The next morning brought a flurry of legal activity. Jennifer's attorney filed an emergency motion for temporary support, claiming financial distress. Claire countered, "With our documentation of the unauthorized emergency fund transfer and the pattern of diverted funds over the preceding months." By afternoon, the judge had issued a limited release of $3,000 from our joint checking account to Jennifer's personal account for immediate living expenses, with the stipulation that all other assets remain frozen pending the preliminary hearing scheduled for the following week. "It's a reasonable compromise," Claire assured me when I questioned the decision. "The court wants to ensure basic needs are met while protecting the majority of the assets, and it actually helps our position by showing we're not attempting to leave her without resources, just preventing further significant diversion of funds." I nodded, accepting the logic. "What's next?" "We continue building our case. The financial misconduct evidence is strong, but we should prepare for aggressive tactics from Hargrove. He'll likely focus on emotional narratives, portraying you as controlling, the marriage as unhappy, Jennifer's actions as desperate attempts to escape, all while ignoring the financial evidence." "Exactly. Emotional appeals can sometimes sway judges. Even with clear documentation to the contrary, we need to be prepared for that angle." That evening, David arrived at my hotel room with Thai, food, and a folder of additional documentation. "I've been mapping Jennifer's communication patterns," he explained as we ate. "With your permission from the monitoring system, I was able to identify recurring contacts during her trips to Seattle." He spread printouts across the desk, call logs, location data, message patterns that revealed a clear timeline of Jennifer's relationship with Alex Reynolds. The earliest contact had been 11 months ago, with communication frequency increasing steadily over time. "Most concerning is this," David said, pointing to a series of financial records. "Reynolds has significant debt, maxed-out credit cards, a business loan in default, back taxes from a failed wellness center venture 2 years ago, and in the past 6 months there have been multiple payments from Jennifer's secret account to his business entities." I reviewed the documentation with professional detachment, as if analyzing a client's vulnerability assessment rather than my wife's betrayal. "She's been funding his business and more. There's a down payment on a condo in Seattle 3 weeks ago, $15,000 from her secret account. The application lists both their names." The final piece clicked into place. Not just an affair. A new life. One Jennifer had been methodically building and funding with our joint resources while maintaining the facade of our marriage. "Thank you for digging into this," I said, gathering the documents. "I'll forward everything to Claire." David studied me with concern. "How are you really doing with all this, Mike? You're handling it with impressive composure, but this has to be hitting you on some level." I considered the question carefully. "I'm angry," I finally admitted. "Not just about the affair or the money, but about the calculation of it all. The methodical planning while pretending everything was normal, the sheer extent of the deception." "That's a healthy response," David assured me. "The anger means you recognize the injustice of what's happening. It's when you stop feeling anything that I'd worry." I nodded, grateful for his perspective. "The strangest part is that despite the anger, I also feel liberated. Like I've been carrying a weight I didn't fully recognize until it was removed." Dad used to say that truth is always lighter than deception, even when the truth is painful. "He would have seen this coming," I said. "He tried to warn me in his way." "Maybe, but he also raised us to face reality squarely, however uncomfortable. That's what you're doing now." After David left, I spent the evening preparing for the week ahead. The preliminary hearing would establish temporary arrangements for finances and property while the divorce proceeded. I needed to be ready for whatever strategy Jennifer and her attorney might employ. I typed out detailed notes about our marriage history, Jennifer's changing behavior patterns, the financial discoveries that had led to Protocol Phoenix. It was a clinical dissection of 12 years of shared life, reducing intimate moments and profound connections to data points in a dissolution strategy. Yet even as I documented the end of my marriage with professional precision, I found myself remembering the beginning, Jennifer's genuine excitement about my work in those early days, her hand reaching for mine during movies, the way she'd once known exactly when I needed quiet and when I needed conversation. I wondered when that attunement had faded. When had we stopped truly seeing each other? Had Jennifer's deception been a cause of our disconnection or a symptom of something already broken? These questions had no immediate answers. For now, I had only the path forward, methodical, strategic, and carefully planned, just as Protocol Phoenix had intended from the beginning. The morning of the preliminary hearing arrived with steady rain battering against my hotel window, fitting weather for what promised to be a contentious day. I dressed methodically in my most conservative suit, charcoal grey with subtle pinstripes, crisp white shirt, navy tie, the uniform of financial respectability. Claire had advised projecting stability and professionalism, qualities that would contrast sharply with whatever emotional narrative Jennifer's attorney planned to present. I met Claire in the courthouse lobby 30 minutes before our scheduled appearance. She was reviewing documents with the focused intensity that had made her one of Portland's most respected divorce attorneys. "Any last-minute developments?" I asked, setting my briefcase beside her. Jennifer's attorney filed supplemental declarations this morning, alleging financial control and emotional neglect throughout the marriage, Claire replied, handing me the documents. "Standard tactics, but we should be prepared for him to paint you as cold and calculating." I skimmed the declarations, noting Jennifer's creative reinterpretation of our marital history. According to her statement, I had been controlling, distant, obsessed with money, and resentful of her career success. The emergency fund transfer was characterized as a desperate attempt to establish independence from an emotionally barren marriage. "Interesting revision of reality," I commented, returning the papers to Claire. "It's to be expected. Most divorce cases eventually devolve into competing narratives. The good news is that narratives don't override financial evidence, especially when it's as thoroughly documented as yours." We entered courtroom 3B, taking our places at the plaintiff's table. Minutes later, Jennifer arrived with William Hargrove, her appearance carefully calibrated for maximum sympathy. Gone were the designer clothes and perfect styling, replaced by a simple blouse and minimal makeup. She'd even removed her expensive jewelry, with the exception of her wedding ring, a strategic touch I had to admire despite myself. She didn't acknowledge me as she took her seat, keeping her gaze fixed on her attorney's notes. I studied her profile, searching for traces of the woman I'd married, the poised marketing executive who could command a room with her presence, the confident partner who'd once challenged me to dream bigger, the person I'd built a life with for 12 years. Instead, I saw a performer preparing for her role in the drama about to unfold. Judge Eleanor Reeves entered the courtroom, a veteran, family court judge known for her no-nonsense approach to divorce proceedings. After preliminary introductions, she addressed the attorneys directly. "I've reviewed the filings from both parties. Mr. Hargrove, you've requested emergency relief from the asset freeze currently in place. Ms. Donovan, you've provided substantial documentation regarding unauthorized financial transactions. Let's begin with the most pressing matter, the contested emergency fund transfer." Hargrove rose first, straightening his expensive tie. "Your Honor, my client acknowledges transferring funds from a joint account to her personal account. However, This was not the nefarious act Mr. Parker portrays. Mrs. Parker was securing her financial future in the face of an increasingly controlling marital environment. He proceeded to paint a picture of Jennifer as a successful professional whose contributions to the marriage had been systematically devalued. The emergency fund transfer, which he carefully avoided calling a withdrawal, was characterized as her attempt to establish necessary independence. Furthermore, Your Honor, Hargrove continued, Mr. Parker's immediate response, freezing all accounts, cutting off access to marital assets, effectively rendering my client financially stranded, demonstrates exactly the controlling behavior she was attempting to escape. This is financial abuse, plain and simple. Judge Reeves listened impassively, occasionally making notes. When Hargrove finished his emotional appeal, she turned to Claire. Ms. Donovan, your response? Claire rose calmly. Your Honor, we have a fundamental disagreement about the nature of joint accounts and marital financial responsibility. When Mrs. Parker transferred nearly $28,000 without discussion or agreement, she violated that responsibility. The funds were designated as an emergency fund for both parties, not a resource for one spouse to appropriate unilaterally. She methodically presented our documentation, the history of the account, email records showing our mutual agreement about its purpose, bank statements revealing the transfer timing, and most damaging, Jennifer's text message explicitly connecting the withdrawal to extending her stay with the person she'd met. Additionally, Your Honor, Claire continued, we have evidence of a pattern of financial misconduct preceding this incident. She presented the records of Jennifer's secret account and the series of smaller transfers from our joint funds over the previous 6 months. This was not a one-time action born of desperation, but the culmination of methodical financial diversion. When the bank flagged the emergency fund transfer as potential fraud, it was merely identifying what was objectively true: unauthorized use of joint funds. Judge Reeves reviewed the documentation carefully before addressing Jennifer directly. Mrs. Parker, did you consult with your husband before transferring these funds? Jennifer straightened in her chair. No, Your Honor, but in our marriage, I've never needed permission to access our joint accounts. There's a difference between access for normal expenses and emptying an emergency fund, the judge observed. What was the emergency? Jennifer hesitated, glancing at her attorney. I was establishing financial independence in preparation for leaving an unfulfilling marriage. That's not an emergency, Judge Reeves stated flatly. That's planning a separation, which should be done with transparency and equity. She turned to Claire. The court finds sufficient evidence to maintain the asset freeze with the exception of the limited release already granted for basic living expenses. Hargrove immediately objected. Your Honor, my client has ongoing financial obligations that cannot be met with the limited funds released. She has rent due on an apartment, professional commitments requiring appropriate attire and transportation. An apartment in Seattle, correct? Claire interjected. Judge Reeves looked up sharply. Is this accurate, Mrs. Parker? Jennifer shifted uncomfortably. I maintain a small apartment in Seattle for business purposes. My marketing role requires frequent travel there. Claire calmly presented the lease agreement David had uncovered. Your Honor, this lease was signed 3 weeks ago with both Jennifer Parker and Alexander Reynolds listed as occupants. It's not a business accommodation but a personal residence established without Mr. Parker's knowledge, using diverted marital funds. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Reeves examined the document. Jennifer stared straight ahead, her carefully constructed narrative visibly crumbling. Mr. Hargrove, the judge finally said, your emergency motion for additional fund release is denied. The existing freeze will remain in place until full financial disclosure from both parties is complete. She turned to Jennifer. Mrs. Parker, the court takes a dim view of financial misconduct, particularly when followed by misrepresentation. You would be well advised to provide complete transparency going forward. As we exited the courtroom, Jennifer caught my arm. Michael, we need to talk, without the attorneys. I glanced at Claire, who nodded slightly. 5 minutes, she said. I'll wait in the hallway. Jennifer led me to a quiet corner of the courthouse corridor. Her composure had slipped, the careful victim persona replaced by the shrewd strategist I knew so well. This isn't going how I expected, she admitted, dropping her voice. We should consider mediation instead of letting this drag through the courts. Interesting pivot, I observed. An hour ago, I was a controlling abuser. Now you want private negotiation? The legal approach isn't serving either of us. We're both intelligent people who built a life together. Surely we can unwind it without destroying each other. I studied her, recognizing the negotiation tactic, appeal to shared history and mutual benefit when your position weakens. You emptied our emergency fund and diverted joint assets to establish a life with someone else. You didn't want negotiation then. Why now? Because this is getting ugly unnecessarily, she insisted. Yes, I made mistakes. I handled things poorly. But dragging each other through public proceedings benefits no one except the attorneys. I agree that protracted litigation serves neither of us, I said carefully. But any negotiation would need to start with complete financial transparency and acknowledgement of misconduct. Her expression hardened slightly. You want me to grovel before discussing terms? I want honesty, Jennifer. Something that's been notably absent recently. She glanced away, recalibrating. Fine. I've been seeing Alex for several months. I opened a separate account and used some of our joint funds. I should have been more direct about wanting to end our marriage. Is that honest enough? It's a start, I acknowledged, but complete transparency would include the condo down payment, the joint lease in Seattle, and the money you've been providing for Alex's business ventures. Her eyes widened slightly, revealing her surprise at the extent of my knowledge. How did you— Never mind. Yes, I helped Alex with some business investments. He has tremendous potential that just needs proper financial backing. I chose not to comment on this assessment, having seen the documentation of Reynolds' repeated business failures. If you're serious about negotiation, have your attorney contact mine with a comprehensive financial disclosure and settlement proposal. I'm open to reasonable terms. And the accounts, I need access to funds, Michael. The court has ruled on that for now. $3,000 for immediate expenses, with the rest frozen pending disclosure and settlement. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to an intimate level. This isn't who we are, Michael. 12 years together, reduced to legal maneuvers and financial audits. Remember when we actually cared about each other's happiness? For a moment, I caught a glimpse of the Jennifer I'd married, earnest, present, connected. Whether it was genuine or another calculated performance, I couldn't tell. Perhaps she couldn't either anymore. I do remember, I said quietly, which is why this situation is particularly disappointing. Claire appeared at the end of the corridor, signaling our time was up. I nodded to Jennifer and walked away, feeling both the weight of what we'd once shared and the relief of no longer carrying the uncertainty that had shadowed our final years together. In the car afterward, Claire was cautiously optimistic. Judge, Reeves clearly saw through their narrative. The freeze remains in place, and Jennifer's credibility took a significant hit with the Seattle apartment revelation. She suggested private negotiation after the hearing, I informed her. Classic pivot when the litigation strategy isn't working. Are you interested in pursuing that route? I considered the question carefully. If it can resolve matters efficiently without sacrificing equity, yes. The performance in court today was exhausting. Most clients find it so, Claire agreed. I'll contact Hargrove and set parameters for settlement discussions. In the meantime, we proceed with discovery and preparation as planned. The following week brought a strategic shift from Jennifer's camp. Hargrove contacted Claire proposing formal mediation, acknowledging that the financial misconduct evidence made their litigation position challenging. After consultation, we agreed to the process with specific conditions: full financial disclosure from both parties prior to mediation, and formal recognition of the emergency fund transfer as improper use of joint assets. What Jennifer's team didn't know was that this approach aligned perfectly with Phase 4 of Protocol Phoenix, negotiated resolution once leverage was established. The goal had never been punitive, it was protective, securing what was rightfully mine while allowing for an efficient end to a marriage that had clearly run its course. 2 days before the scheduled mediation, David called with an unexpected development. "Mike, I've been monitoring the financial alerts as part of Phoenix, and something interesting just popped up. Alex Reynolds' gym business filed for bankruptcy. Protection yesterday." "Not surprising given what we know about his finances," I commented. "How does this affect our situation?" Here's where it gets interesting. Jennifer is listed as a guarantor on the business loan for his equipment, and the bank has already filed to enforce the guarantee, which means they're coming after her assets. Assets that are currently frozen in our divorce proceeding, I noted, seeing the implication immediately. Exactly. She's financially exposed on multiple fronts now. The creditors will be included in any disclosure of liabilities affecting the marital estate. This new information created both opportunity and complication. Jennifer's financial entanglement with Reynolds extended beyond personal support to legal liability for his business failures. Her negotiating position was now significantly compromised, and she likely didn't even realize it yet. I called Claire immediately to share this development. After a thoughtful pause, she said, "This creates a time-sensitive advantage. If we reach settlement before the creditors formally join the proceedings, we can potentially structure terms that protect your share of assets from these claims." "Is that ethical?" I asked, genuinely concerned about the propriety of such an approach. "Completely ethical, as long as we make full disclosure in our proceedings," Claire assured me. "We're not hiding assets or creating fraudulent transfers. We're simply expediting a legitimate divorce settlement before third-party claims complicate the process." The morning of the mediation, I arrived at Claire's office to review our strategy. The conference room was prepared with comprehensive financial documentation, including the recent bankruptcy filing affecting Jennifer's liabilities. Our settlement proposal was reasonable but firm. I would retain my LLC and its assets, Jennifer would keep her retirement accounts and personal property, and we would sell the house and divide the proceeds according to contribution percentages. All joint debts incurred during the marriage would be divided equitably, but each party would be solely responsible for any individual liabilities incurred without the other's knowledge or consent. Jennifer and Hargrove arrived precisely at 9 a.m., both presenting a more conciliatory demeanor than during the court hearing. The mediator, a retired judge with extensive family law experience, began by establishing ground rules and reminding everyone that the goal was mutually acceptable resolution rather than perfect justice. As the mediation progressed, it became apparent that Jennifer hadn't fully understood the implications of her financial decisions. When Claire presented documentation of the gym equipment loan guarantee and the subsequent bankruptcy filing, Jennifer visibly paled. "I signed as a witness, not a guarantor," she insisted, reviewing the paperwork with growing alarm. "The document clearly indicates secondary liability," Claire pointed out gently. "Your signature is on the guarantor line, not the witness line." "Alex said it was just a formality," Jennifer murmured. more to herself than to us. That his business, assets more than covered the loan value. Hargrove requested a brief recess, during which I could hear their heated whispers from the adjacent room. When they returned, Jennifer's composed facade had cracked, revealing the stress underneath. "We're prepared to accept most terms of your proposed settlement," Hargrove announced, "with some adjustments to the house proceeds division and personal property allocation." The negotiation proceeded more smoothly after that, with Jennifer showing uncharacteristic flexibility on points she'd previously contested. By late afternoon, we had reached agreement on all major issues, with only details remaining for the final document drafting. As the mediator and attorneys worked on language, Jennifer and I found ourselves alone in the conference room briefly. She looked exhausted, the carefully maintained image of controlled success finally giving way to the reality of her situation. "You knew about the loan guarantee, didn't you?" she asked quietly. "Before today." "I learned about it recently," I acknowledged. "And you didn't use it to destroy me in court. You could have." "That was never my goal, Jennifer." She studied me with newfound wariness. "I've underestimated you all these years. I thought I knew exactly who you were, competent, reliable, predictable. I never saw this side of you." "You never looked," I replied without rancor. "We both made assumptions about each other that weren't entirely accurate." "Alex is furious about the bankruptcy," she admitted after a moment. "He's blaming me for not securing more funding to keep things afloat. Says I misled him about our financial situation." I chose my words carefully. People often reveal their true priorities under financial pressure. "Like I did with the emergency fund," she acknowledged ruefully. "I never expected the bank to flag it immediately and call you." "Marcus from the bank plays racquetball with me every week," I explained. "He recognized the unusual transaction pattern and called as a courtesy. The system was doing exactly what it was designed to do, protecting us from unauthorized activity." Jennifer shook her head slowly. "All those years, you talked about risk assessment and security protocols. I thought it was just technical jargon, not something that would ever affect our real life." "It was always real, Jennifer. That's what I tried to explain when you would dismiss my work as just spreadsheets and boring numbers. Financial systems reflect human behavior, the good and the bad." The attorneys returned with the finalized settlement agreement, ending our unexpected moment of honesty. After reviewing the documents with our respective counsel, we both signed, officially beginning the end of our 12-year marriage. In the lobby afterward, Jennifer stopped me once more. "Michael, I know this doesn't change anything, but I am sorry, not just for the money, for not seeing you clearly, for not valuing what you brought to our relationship." I nodded, accepting her apology without need for elaboration. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Jennifer." "I'm not sure I even know what that is anymore," she admitted, "but I'll have to figure it out on my own now." As she walked away, I felt an unexpected sense of closure, not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. We had both contributed to the distance that had grown between us, Jennifer through deception and dissatisfaction, me through emotional withholding and silent judgment. The marriage had failed long before the emergency fund transfer. That had merely been the catalyst for acknowledging what was already broken. I returned to the Riverside Hotel and called David to update him on the settlement. "Phoenix is complete," I said when he answered. "Settlement signed, assets protected, clean, break established." "How do you feel?" he asked, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. I considered the question carefully, relieved, sad, vindicated, disappointed, all of it simultaneously. "That sounds about right," David replied. "Want company tonight? Mom's made her lasagna and insists I deliver some to you." "Actually, yes," I decided. "I could use the company, and tell Mom her timing is perfect, as always." Later that evening, sitting in my hotel room with David, eating our mother's lasagna from takeout containers, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past weeks. From the moment of discovery to the signed settlement, I had moved through the stages of Protocol Phoenix with methodical precision, exactly as planned. Yet the emotional reality had been far messier than any spreadsheet could capture. "You know what surprised me most through all this?" I said, setting down my fork. "What's that?" How calm I felt. Even in the worst moments, seeing Jennifer in my office after she'd emptied the account, hearing her try to rewrite our marriage history in court, I never lost my composure. It was like watching events happen to someone else. David nodded, thoughtfully. Self-protection mechanism. Dad was the same way during Mom's cancer scare years ago, completely steady through the diagnosis, treatment decisions, everything. Then after she got the all clear, he went out to the woodshed and completely fell apart. Only time I ever saw him cry as an adult. You think that'll happen to me? Delayed reaction? Maybe. Or maybe you've been processing it all along, just quietly. Not everyone needs a dramatic breakdown to move through grief. Is that what this is? Grief? Of course it is, David said matter-of-factly. You're mourning the end of a 12-year marriage, the loss of the future you thought you'd have, the person you thought Jennifer was. That's profound grief, even if it doesn't look how people expect grief to look. His words resonated with unexpected truth. Beneath the strategic planning and methodical execution, I had been grieving not just the marriage itself, but the illusion of connection it had represented. I keep thinking about something Dad told me after my first divorce, I admitted. He said, "Some lessons cost more than others, but none are wasted if you actually learn from them." Sounds like Dad, David smiled. What's the lesson here, do you think? I considered the question carefully. That preparation matters, but not in the way I thought. I created Protocol Phoenix to protect myself financially if the marriage failed, but the real protection came from being willing to see the truth, however painful, and act on it decisively. And the other lesson, David prompted, that I need to be more present in my own life. I observed the signs of Jennifer's dissatisfaction and deception with professional detachment instead of addressing them directly. I noticed everything except what really mattered, that we'd stopped truly seeing each other years ago. David nodded approvingly. Now that sounds like growth rather than just self-protection. Dad would be proud. 3 days later, I checked out of the Riverside Hotel and moved temporarily into David's guest room while looking for a new place to live. The hillside house was being prepared for sale, with Jennifer having already removed her personal belongings. According to our settlement, I had 2 weeks to inventory and remove my possessions before the property would be listed. Walking through the house that weekend felt like visiting a museum exhibition about a life I'd once lived. The carefully selected furniture, the strategic lighting, the curated art, all had been elements of the image we'd constructed rather than expressions of genuine connection. Only my office and the small reading nook in the back sunroom felt authentically mine. As I packed books and personal mementos, I discovered a photo album I hadn't seen in years, tucked behind reference volumes on my office shelf. Inside were pictures from the early days of our relationship, hiking in the Columbia Gorge, weekend trips to the coast, casual dinners with friends. Jennifer's smile in these images reached her eyes in a way it hadn't in our later professional photographs. My own expression was more open, less guarded. I sat on the floor of my office, turning pages slowly, remembering the genuine connection we'd once shared before ambition and appearance became our defining priorities. These moments hadn't been an illusion. They had been real, even if they couldn't sustain the weight of what came after. I placed the album in my box of personal items, a reminder that what had ended contained both authentic joy and profound disappointment. Both could be true, simultaneously. Both were part of the complex reality of human connection. David arrived to help load the last of my belongings, finding me sitting amidst half-packed boxes. "Everything okay?" he asked, noting my contemplative mood. "Just thinking about beginnings and endings," I replied, showing him the photo album, "and how they're sometimes difficult to distinguish in the middle." He nodded, understanding without need for elaboration. "That's the thing about risk assessment, isn't it? You can identify vulnerability points, create contingency plans, establish security protocols, but you can never fully predict how things will unfold when human emotions are involved." "True," I acknowledged, though Protocol Phoenix worked exactly as designed from a financial perspective. "Because money follows predictable rules," David pointed out. "People don't. That's what makes them simultaneously more valuable and more dangerous than any asset." We finished loading my belongings in comfortable silence, each box representing another step toward the new life that awaited beyond this ending. As I locked the front door for the final time, I felt not the sharp pain of loss, but the quieter ache of completion, one chapter closing, another yet to be written. The following week, I found a modest condominium in a riverside development downtown, walking distance to my office, with a small fenced yard for Scout and enough space for a home office. It was nothing like the showcase hillside house, but it felt more authentic to who I actually was, rather than who I'd been pretending to be in my marriage. 2 days after signing the lease, I received an unexpected email from Jennifer with the subject line, "Thought you should know." The message was brief and surprisingly vulnerable. "Michael, I wanted you to hear this from me directly. Alex and I are no longer together. After the bankruptcy filing and loan issues came to light, things deteriorated quickly. He's moved back to California, leaving me with the apartment lease and considerable debt. I'm not sharing this for sympathy, but because I owe you the truth after everything. The settlement you offered was more than fair, especially considering what I did. I didn't deserve your restraint. Jay." I sat with this information for several moments, feeling neither satisfaction nor pity, just a quiet acknowledgement of consequences naturally unfolding. I composed a simple reply. "Jennifer, thank you for letting me know. I'm sorry things ended that way for you. Despite everything, I hope you find stability and contentment moving forward. Michael." After sending the reply, I closed my laptop and took Scout for a long walk along the riverfront, considering the strange symmetry of endings occurring simultaneously. Jennifer's relationship with Reynolds collapsing as our marriage officially dissolved, the hillside house being prepared for new owners as I established a new home, the emergency fund that had been emptied now being replenished through the settlement proceeds. Life rarely offers clean breaks or perfect justice, but sometimes, if you're patient and observant, it provides something more valuable: the opportunity to rebuild with greater awareness and authenticity than before. 6 months after the settlement was signed, I stood on the deck of my new condominium, watching the spring sunset paint the Willamette River in shades of gold and amber. Scout lay at my feet, contentedly gnawing on a bone, occasionally glancing up as if to confirm I was still there. The river traffic moved below, kayakers enjoying the extended evening light, a tour boat filled with tourists photographing the cityscape, water taxis ferrying commuters home. Life in constant motion, flowing forward regardless of individual circumstances. My new home was nothing like the hillside showcase Jennifer and I had maintained. The condominium was modern, but modest, with an open floor plan, practical furnishings, and a small deck overlooking the river. I decorated minimally, comfortable. Furniture, a few carefully selected art pieces, bookshelves filled with volumes I actually read rather than displayed for impression. The space reflected who I was rather than who I was trying to appear to be. perhaps the most significant change since the divorce. The hillside house had sold quickly, at slightly above asking price, with the proceeds divided according to our settlement agreement. Jennifer had used her share to resolve the financial entanglements left by her relationship with Reynolds, including the loan guarantee that had nearly bankrupted her personally when his business collapsed. According to mutual friends, she'd scaled back her lifestyle considerably, downsizing to a small apartment and focusing on rebuilding her career after changing firms. We hadn't spoken directly since the final divorce papers were signed. Our last exchange had been surprisingly cordial, brief acknowledgements of the paperwork completion, followed by sincere, if somewhat formal, well-wishes for the future. The anger and betrayal that had defined the early stages of our separation had gradually transformed into something more nuanced, a quiet recognition that what had ended had served its purpose for a time, leaving both of us with lessons we needed to learn. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Still on for dinner? Emma's making her famous lasagna." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. "Need me to bring anything?" "Just yourself, and maybe that chocolate porter from the Riverside Brewery if you're passing by." I smiled, grateful for my brother's steady presence through the upheaval of the past year. David and his wife Emma had provided not just practical support during the divorce process, but the emotional anchoring I'd needed while rebuilding my life. Their home had become my sanctuary during the most difficult periods, their family dinners a reminder of the authentic connections that sustained when more superficial relationships faltered. Inside, I changed from work clothes into casual attire, then grabbed my keys and Scout's leash. The Riverside Brewery was indeed on my way to David's, and the evening was perfect for a walk with Scout before driving the rest of the way. As we strolled along the riverfront path, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year, not just the end of my marriage, but the rebuilding that had followed. The professional part had been relatively straightforward. My risk assessment practice continued to thrive, with several new clients added since the divorce. I'd even expanded my services to include personal financial security consulting, using the lessons from Protocol Phoenix to help others protect themselves from potential financial misconduct. The experience that had nearly destroyed me had become, ironically, a source of professional growth. The personal rebuilding had been more challenging. After 12 years of marriage, I'd needed to rediscover who I was as an individual rather than as half of a couple. What I enjoyed, what mattered to me, how I wanted to structure my days and my environment. Some discoveries had been surprising. A newfound interest in kayaking, a preference for cooking meals from scratch rather than ordering takeout, an appreciation for local community events I'd previously dismissed as too ordinary for Jennifer's taste. At the brewery, I tied Scout to a bench outside and went in to purchase the chocolate porter David had requested. The bartender recognized me as I'd become something of a regular over the past few months. "The usual for you, too?" she asked, already reaching for a pint glass. "Just the takeaway tonight," I replied. "Family dinner." She nodded, packaging the bottles efficiently. "Nice evening for it. Enjoy." This small interaction, being recognized, the casual friendliness, represented another aspect of my new life. In the carefully curated world Jennifer and I had inhabited, relationships had been strategic rather than genuine. Business contacts, social connections that advanced careers, neighbors whose lifestyles matched our aspirational image. Now I found myself developing simpler, more authentic connections. The bartender who remembered my preferences, the elderly couple in my building who watched Scout when I traveled, the weekend hiking group I joined through the community center. Arriving at David's suburban home 30 minutes later, I was greeted by my nieces before I'd even closed the car door. Lily and Emma, now 13, had appointed themselves my official recovery committee after the divorce, regularly presenting me with questionable artwork, home-baked cookies of varying edibility, and unsolicited but surprisingly insightful advice on getting back out there. "Uncle Mike, did you bring Scout?" Lily called, already peering into my car. "Of course," I replied, opening the back door to release my eager golden retriever. He wouldn't miss Emma's lasagna either. Inside, David's home hummed with the comfortable chaos of family life. Homework spread across the dining table, sports equipment piled by the door, the sound of Emma singing along to music in the kitchen. It was a stark contrast to the pristine order of the hillside house, and I found myself increasingly drawn to this messy authenticity. "Just in time," David said, emerging from the kitchen with sauce-splattered apron. "Emma's putting the finishing touches on dinner, and Mom just called. She's running 15 minutes late." Our mother had become more present in my life since the divorce, offering the kind of practical support she knew I would accept, rather than the emotional counseling I might resist. She brought occasional home-cooked meals to my condo, sent articles about financial security she thought might interest me professionally, and never once said, "I told you so," about Jennifer, despite having had reservations from the beginning. Dinner was a lively affair, with my nieces dominating the conversation with detailed accounts of middle school drama, my mother offering updates on her community garden project, and David sharing stories from his cybersecurity work. I found myself engaging fully, present in a way I realized I hadn't been during family gatherings in the later years of my marriage, when I'd been preoccupied with maintaining the appearance of success rather than experiencing genuine connection. After dinner, while Emma supervised the girls' homework and my mother helped with dishes, David and I stepped out to the back deck with our beers. "So," he said after a comfortable silence, "1 year mark coming up next month. How are you really doing?" I considered the question carefully, appreciating that he was asking about my emotional state rather than just my practical circumstances. "I'm good," I said finally. "Not just managing or surviving. Actually good." "I can see that," he nodded. "You seem more present, more like yourself." "I'm not sure I knew who that was for a while," I admitted. "Somewhere along the way with Jennifer, I started living according to her script rather than my own. The responsible, successful husband in the perfect house with the perfect life. The irony is that you were always those things, responsible, successful, but authentically not as a performance," David observed. "Dad saw that distinction, I think. It's why he worried." I nodded, remembering my father's gentle warnings. He'd be relieved to see how things turned out, not the divorce itself, but the return to authenticity afterward. "Speaking of which," David said casually, "Emma's friend Rebecca asked about you again. The landscape architect who came to the barbecue last month. She mentioned you seemed interesting but hard to read." I smiled ruefully. "A fair assessment. I'm not ready for that yet. Still figuring out who I am on my own before involving someone else in the equation." "No rush," David assured me. "Just know that when you are ready, life has a way of offering new beginnings, and you don't have to have everything perfectly analyzed and risk-assessed before taking a chance." His gentle challenge made me laugh. Noted, the risk assessor does occasionally need to be reminded that not everything in life can be quantified in a spreadsheet. Later that evening, driving home with a sleepy Scout in the back seat, I reflected on David's words about new beginnings. The divorce had been necessary, painful but ultimately liberating. It had forced me to confront not just Jennifer's deception, but my own participation in a relationship that had prioritized appearance over substance, achievement over connection. The emergency fund that had sparked the final confrontation had been fully replenished with additional safeguards that reflected my professional expertise. But the true security I'd established wasn't financial. It was the reconnection with my authentic self, the reconstruction of relationships based on genuine value rather than strategic advantage, the creation of a life that could withstand scrutiny, because it was built on truth rather than performance. Back at my condo, I took Scout for one final walk along the riverfront. The spring night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights, the water reflecting the illuminated bridges that connected Portland's east and west sides. Metaphors about bridges and connections seemed too obvious to dwell on, but I appreciated the simple beauty of the scene without need for deeper meaning. As we turned back toward home, I noticed a kayaker navigating the evening river, solo, confident, perfectly balanced between motion and stillness. 6 months earlier, I'd signed up for lessons on a whim, seeking something completely removed from my previous life. Now I found myself on the water regularly, enjoying the meditative quality of moving with rather than against the current. Next weekend, I'd be taking my first overnight kayaking trip, camping on one of the river islands outside the city. A small adventure by most standards, but a significant departure from the carefully controlled experiences that had characterized my married life. My mother had been surprisingly enthusiastic about the plan, revealing that my father had enjoyed river camping in his younger days, another connection I hadn't known about while he was alive. Some lessons did indeed cost more than others, as my father had observed. The end of my marriage had extracted a significant price, both financially and emotionally. But standing by the river with Scout, watching the night settle over the city I'd always called home, but somehow saw differently now, I understood that the value of what I'd gained might ultimately outweigh what I'd lost. Not because the pain wasn't real, not because the betrayal didn't matter, but because the emergency that had revealed the underlying fractures in my marriage had also created space for something more authentic to emerge from the wreckage. Something built not on appearance or achievement or accumulation, but on the steadier foundation of genuine connection with others and, perhaps more importantly, with myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.